recording and monitoring. To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
Morning, Dean.
Lee, how are you?
Oh, great. You're about to start the meeting this morning?
Yes, kind of absorbed in getting it up and getting it going. If you were able to call again, or should I just keep you on and we'll just have you start the meeting?
That would be in about 10 minutes, would it?
Yeah?
Yeah. Okay.
That would give.
I'll try to call back because there's a bunch of people here around the phone here, and there's like phones, and everybody's trying to use it.
Hey Lee, let's just stay on, okay?
Okay.
That's a really appropriate way to start the program.
Yeah. Okay.
So, we will stay on, and we will start with you. Just a quick, just say hello to everybody. I'll introduce you and say hello to everybody.
Okay.
And that's what we'll do.
Is Gil there this morning?
Yes. Liz is on the call. She's presently muted and getting ready to go.
Excellent.
But look at Catherine. Hi, Catherine. Can you wave to me? All right. We just had our average age reduced by about 50, 60 years by the presence of a 3-year-old girl on the Zoom. That's very cool. Our youngest Zoomer ever.
Yeah, that's good.
Hey, Catherine.
Og vi væk? Nej. Ja, vi er væk. Okay, sorry. Okay. Her attendance is already gone.
Let's see. If I'm not mistaken, we are recording on YouTube. So, Rob, a little change of plans. Since this is all about prison, one of our prison members behind bars is on the phone, so we're going to start with him just saying hello to us. If you want to really quietly tinkle all during that, I hope we can hear him over that. Hey, Lee.
Dean, the sound is very bad. Also, I don't know.
Well, I'm trying to do something else right now, Rudiger.
He's too far away from the mic.
Yeah. So, Charlie, tell me if you can hear Lee talking. Talk a little bit, Lee, please.
Hey, good morning, Charlie. How are you?
It's very low.
Oh, how about this? Talk again, Lee.
Okay.
That's good.
What is the date of today? It's October 25th.
Okay, Lee. Lee, we got you, and we're gonna start with you. And if you could just give us a quick 5-minute welcome, okay?
Okay.
And
Good morning.
wait, not yet. I just want to there's 7 people waiting to enter. Charlie, if you could be on top of just admitting the new people. There we go. So we're ready to start, okay? Hold on. Lee?
Yes.
Here we go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Community Church of Boston. It's Dean, and this is our morning around prison issues. We have Liz Matos speaking to us, but we're starting in a very unorthodox, different way, and that is because we have one of our members behind bars on the phone here, and we're going to spend 5 minutes with Lee Underwood just to start the program. And the reason to do this like this is that Lee got a call in right at this moment, and it's hard for him because there's a queue of people waiting. We know about phone in prison issues, and we're going to hear more about that as the program progresses. But let's just say hi to Lee. And let's hear from you. Lee, thanks for calling, and say hello to our congregation.
Thank you. Good morning, members. I'm very happy to be able to call in, and it's a privilege to have your time this morning and speak briefly. I hope everyone is happy and healthy this morning, and like you, I'm yearning for any type of normalcy. Normalcy for any one of you would be like just getting your life back in order and striking some balance of normalcy. For me, before I get back to any type of normalcy, would be to go through this parole board that is striking a huge imbalance and fairness, and that's what I'm hoping for myself. For me personally, I will not be seeing the parole board for another inside of 12 months now. I'll see them October of next year. But just like 62% of the population here in prison, we're looking for a favorable decision from a parole board that's anything but fair, in essence, of just getting a equal decision. They're operating right now, I think last average that I saw was 38% of their decisions are favorable, and that's what I'm looking for today. And other than that, I'm just very happy and gracious to be able to share my time with you this morning, and if there was any possibility of getting any feedback or any questions from the members, I would certainly be able to, or be glad to entertain any questions or any type of feedback from you. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dean and wish everyone a very happy and joyous day today. Because today I know you're going to be hearing a very important message from PLS, one of the members, and I would love more than anything to be able to be there or be able to share with some of the information that she's going to be sharing with you today. And I'll turn this over to Dean, and thank you a lot for your time today.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks so much. I want to tell you that since they're allowing visits again, that I will come see you as soon as I can schedule it. And I look forward to that very much, because it's been many, many months. And
you have to set up an appointment.
yes, I'm aware of that. Yeah. But I will do that, and I'll come say hello. So thanks for calling in, Lee, and I'll say goodbye to you, and tell everybody else that that was Lee Underwood from Norfolk MCI, one of our members behind bars, that happened to call right at the beginning of the program. So we sort of dropped everything and said hello to Lee and heard from him. Lee was out on parole and then got put back in for just a really silly little technical violation and has to spend another 2 or 3 years in. It's unconscionable circumstance. Don't get me started. It took the parole board a year to make the decision. Anyway, again, welcome to Community Church. And we have in this lonely auditorium the magnetic, wonderful presence of Rob Flax, who's playing piano right now. He's a multi-instrumentalist. And we're going to start with this reading while Rob plays for us. Out of the world's wide ways we come to this, our house of fellowship and aspiration. Here may the evils which beset us be banished by the power of justice. The fears that haunt us be overcome by fresh insight. The doubts that drive us be dissolved into finer faith. Here, each in our own way, yet together, let us for a brief time look into the mysteries of life's beginning, the source out of which the endless eons roll and countless lives emerge. And with renewed hope, search through this maddening maze of things to find again life's aims and meaning, and above all, life's glory. From Clarence Skinner, who founded Community Church of Boston exactly 100 years ago. Welcome to all of you. We're going to start with a tune that I'm going to sing with Rob Flax. It's sort of become an anthem for us. This is a retelling in a folk version of a song written by Jim Infantino, but the inspiration is a very old song. Many Boston Community Church of Boston grizzled lefties know, which is the Internationale. But this is Jim's version of it that we will play, and I'm so glad to welcome Rob Flax with us. Rob helped me record this song on a record that came out last year that's called Arise, and you can find it on YouTube. You can also get it straight from me. I don't have a copy of it to show you here, but here's the song. It has some things we do over and over, and please join us. And I'm going to take this off so you don't hear me muffled. Here we go. Rise up, you lonely wanderers. Rise up, you hungry people. The hurricane is coming. The land will soon be flooded. The past is dead and over. Rise up and claim your freedom. You are the sleeping giant. Arise, arise, arise. Because in the end, freedom will be international. Do not beg for your salvation from preachers, kings, and masters. The people hold the power. Arise and claim your freedom. The wealthy enjoy privileges only at your acquiescence, only while you stay in darkness. Arise, 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 because in the end, freedom will be international. While politicos divide us, they demand their compensation. They should pray we don't refuse them. Arise and claim your freedom. The wealthy and the powerful are only human beings. On earth we are all equal. Arise, arise, arise. While all of us were sleeping, the bank owners got richer at the expense of all our children. Arise and claim your freedom. They are frightened by our numbers and by our interdependence. Only while you stay in darkness. Arise, arise, arise. Because in the end, freedom will be international. With purchases or vain overconsumption, do not isolate your spirit. Arise and claim your freedom. Your TV and your iPhone seek to keep you in your slumber. Step out into the sunlight.
Arise, arise, arise. Rise up, you lonely wanderers. Rise up, you lonely people. The hurricane is coming. The land will soon be flooded. The past is dead and over. Rise up and claim your freedom. You are the sleeping giant. Arise, arise, arise. Because in the end,
freedom will be.
Because in the end,
Freedom will be international. Thank you, Rob.
thank you, dude.
Thank you, everybody out there. We light this candle this morning. We light this candle for the victims of this pandemic. We light this candle also this morning for Charles Goodell, faithful longtime member of Community Church who passed away this past week. Charles Goodell, who was maybe came to church about 4 or 5 times a year, but always talked about how much he loved Community Church and how his father attended here before him. There's a obituary in the paper with a photo of Charles. I want to show you a little closer, just in case, for some of you who might not remember him, because he was not a regular attendee, but he was here over many decades and faithful contributor and participant at all the annual meetings and fiscal meetings. Charles Goodell presente is what I say. I've got a bunch of things here I want to tell you about. The first one, I show you in the form of this poster here. Fran, are you noticing this?
Come on, Fran, hurry up.
Welcome home, Tommy Rosa. Tommy is another one of our members behind bars who is released. And there will be an event for him at his house, sort of a parade that celebrates Tommy's freedom. He was in for a long, long time. I don't know exactly how many years. He always maintained his innocence, and his case was recently taken up by the Innocence Project. And before the first hearing was at the first hearing, the prosecuting attorney said, "We're not going to continue this, and Tommy, you are released." Just knowing that the Innocence Project had taken up his case, and he was out, and his family is celebrating, and we are going to celebrate with him this afternoon in a car parade by his house. So thank you, Fran Rosnowski, for telling me about this and for letting us know, and congratulations to his family. Tito Rosa is his brother, who called a couple times and told us about his situation. So thank you, Tommy. Also, I want to mention in the same breath Arnie King, who is also released and will join us. Arnie King, whose case we have championed at Community Church for more than 20 years, is finally out and living with his family in Dorchester. Arnie King, who will speak here on this platform 15th of November, in 2 weeks. So congratulations to both of them. Couple more things, couple more churchy things before we get on with the program. Some new additions to our library. One is called The True Flag. It's written by last Sunday's speaker, Stephen Kinzer, Theodore Roosevelt, Mark Twain, and the Birth of American Empire. It's a beautiful read. It's sort of about the birth of imperialism and the contention that went on at that time, turn of the century, 1900. I really like this book a lot. It's in our library. Another one that came is a woman who's going to speak about Donald Lothrop and about his descendant named John Lothrop, who came to the United States before it was the United States in the 1600s and formed a congregation. This is our minister for 39 years, Donald Lothrop's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And so we have this book, and we're going to have a Sunday celebrating Reverend Donald Lothrop, our minister. This auditorium is named after him, and that will be in February. And Ora Smith will join us, as well as some family members of Donald Lothrop, including his daughter. We also have another book that came. This book has been lost for the longest time, and we got another copy of it. It's called The Case That Will Not Die by Herbert Ehrman. It's about Sacco and Vanzetti, and it's about Herbert Ehrman was one of Sacco and Vanzetti's attorneys in the last appeals. His wife was named Sarah Ehrman, and she was a member of this congregation. She won our Sacco and Vanzetti Award for her work against the death penalty in Massachusetts. The Case That Will Not Die, Herbert Ehrman, Sacco and Vanzetti, our sort of martyr patron saints who are on our wall with that beautiful bas-relief. If you've never seen it, I hope when times are normal again, you can come see our sculpture tribute to Sacco and Vanzetti. One last thing I want to read. This is our regular weekly reading from Eduardo Galeano, Uruguayan author and troublemaker, good trouble that is. And this is for today. October 25th, A Stubborn Man is the title of this reading. It wasn't worth much in Colombia, the life of a man. That of a peasant, practically nothing. The life of an Indian, absolutely nothing. That of a rebel Indian, less than nothing. Nevertheless, inexplicably, in 1967, Quintin Lamé died of old age. He was born on this day in 1880 and lived his many years either in prison or in battle. In Tolima, one of the scenes of his mishaps, he was jailed 108 times. In the mugshots, his eyes are always like stewed prunes from prison's first hello, and his head is shaved to sap his strength. Landowners trembled at his name, and no doubt death feared him too. A man of soft speech and delicate gestures, Quintin walked the length and breadth of Colombia, urging indigenous people to rebel. We have not come like unyoked pigs to stick out noses in somebody else's field. This land is our land, Quintin would say, and his tirades were history classes. He spoke of the past, of that present, the why and the when of so much misfortune. Knowing the before lets you create a different after. From Eduardo Galeano, Children of the Days. So we're going to go on with our musical message. I'm so happy to join you with some song, as well as being the host and facilitator. We used to have a sort of revolving facilitation, and I want to invite that to happen again sometime soon. I would like to step away from facilitation, especially when I'm doing the music, which is 3 or 4 times a year, or when Community Voices is singing, which is about the same 3 or 4 times during our season. But I am facilitating and playing music, so I'm so glad to have Rob Flax joining me on that task, and I wish you could be here to enjoy this in person. So I'm going to do one, and Rob is going to do one of his, and this is from Anais Mitchell, Vermont songwriter whose play, The Hadestown, that she used to just tour around Vermont became a blockbuster Broadway hit. And I love this song. It's also recorded with Rob playing numerous instruments on my new record that's called Arise, that you can find directly from me in CD form, or you can find it for free, take your pick, on YouTube, or also on what's that other one called, Spotify. So this is called Why Do We Build the Wall? Why do we build the wall? My children, my children. Why do we build the wall? Why do we build the wall? We build the wall to keep us free. That's why we build the wall. We build the wall to keep us free. Keep us free, my children, my children. How does the wall keep us free? How does the wall keep us free? The wall keeps out the enemy, and we build the wall to keep us free. That's why we build the wall. We build the wall to keep us free. Enemy, my children, my children. Who do we call the enemy? Who do we call the enemy? The enemy is poverty, and the wall keeps out the enemy, and we build the wall to keep us free. That's why we build the wall. We build the wall to keep us free. Because we have, and they have not, my children, my children. Because we have, and they have not. Because we have, and they have not. Because they want what we have got. And the enemy is poverty, and the wall keeps out the enemy, and we build the wall to keep us free. That's why we build the wall. We build the wall to keep us free. What have we got that they would want? My children, my children. What have we got that they would want? What have we got that they would want? We've got a wall to work upon. We have work and they have none, my children, my children. And our work is never done, my children, my children. And the war is never won, my children, my children. And the enemy is poverty, and the wall keeps out the enemy, and we build the wall to keep us free. That's why we build the wall. We build the wall to keep us free. That's why we build the wall. We build the wall to keep us free. We build the wall to keep us free. We build the wall.
That is a beautiful song, Dean.
That wall is about walls between countries, walls between people, walls we build of plexiglass between ourselves, walls we build between each other and our intimates, and walls around prisons. And that's the topic of our conversation here today. We're so glad to welcome Elizabeth Matos to Community Church. It's the first time she's spoken. She's been here before. Elizabeth's husband is named Elder, and I don't know his last name, but he has performed here before. Once was a UN sponsored benefit for victims of a flood in Mozambique. And another time was when Elder and his group, which is called Kinazore, came and played for one of our services. But this is the first time for Elizabeth, and I've come to know her through her postings on a group that's called CEPS, which I read quite a lot of. Jean Traunstein, who has spoken a couple of times here, contributes to that conversation quite a bit. And also Michael Cox, who is the director of Black and Pink and works a lot with Bagley, who has spoken here as well. So we're very glad to welcome you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth is the Executive Director of Prison Legal Services, and I was supposed to have a little bio to read to you, but I don't have it, but I will just express our gratitude for your joining us this morning and talking about something that's very dear to our heart for the sake of our 8 members behind bars. It used to be 10. We have 2 that just were released, which is a wonderful thing. And for the sake of the cause of prison reform and prison abolition. And so with that, I'm going to give it to Elizabeth Matos. Will you all a round of hands and applause for Elizabeth. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dean. That was just such a lovely intro, but also it was so nice to listen to live music, despite the fact that I have a husband who's a musician. We haven't heard a lot of live music, so that was really a treat in beautiful, very meaningful songs. So thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed it. And thank you all so much for having me and tuning in today. I'm so honored to be speaking with you. And I did want to ask Dean about how long, I can talk for a little bit, but I don't know if there's an opportunity to ask, have people ask questions and have the dialogue.
The idea is 30, 40 minutes, movable feast, whatever you need. Okay. And then we'll do one last song and then we'll have Q&A.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. And I did want to say too, I super appreciate Lee Underwood's comments, and I generally like to follow the lead of those most impacted. So I thought it was very apropos that he was able to speak first. And parole is obviously a big issue. I'll touch upon that a bit. So I did want to just say a little bit about myself first, so you know who I am. I am the Director of Prisoners Legal Services. I have been for the last 2 years, but have been at PLS, was at PLS as a staff attorney since 2011. The prior director was Leslie Walker and had been at PLS for 18 years, so really long time. And I did a lot of great work bringing the organization to where it is today. And there are a number of people on this Zoom who are experts in this field. So I love seeing others who are in this work. And actually our board president, Patty Guerin, is on the Zoom, who has put decades of her own passion and energy into the organization, as has her husband, Josh Doan, who I see there in the background. Longtime supporters of PLS. But, I haven't always done prison work. And I just want to say that before PLS, I did a fair amount of work. My background is really on human rights and immigration. And I met Helder in Mozambique when I was doing human rights work there, and have always been interested in that because I'm a first generation immigrant, and saw growing up just how systematic inequality is, and discrimination, and that we, again, create walls between communities, whether we live right next to each other or not, and have all kinds of ways of being unwelcoming to folks. And unfortunately, that is part of our history here and something that I experienced firsthand growing up. And so that's always been what has driven me in the work that I've done, whether it's been immigration or human rights, or in this incredibly important work with a system that is shameful, not just comparing it to other countries around the world, and how we treat people who are incarcerated, but in our legacy of incarceration in this country being really built upon systems of racism and subjugation and control. And we have a lot of work to do if we actually want to help people come out better and put less people in prisons, and of course, work towards the goal of not needing them to begin with. So another little piece that I sometimes mention is that I have family that has been incarcerated as well. So this is personal for me, and have had other loved ones incarcerated. And so have others on our staff. We have a number of people, 4 people who've been incarcerated themselves on our staff, and a number of others who've had family members or have family members incarcerated. So this is personal for them too. But PLS, originally called Prisoners' Rights Project, was created in 1972 on the heels of the Attica riots, which I'm sure many of you remember. And it started as a very small organization, and today, we are a legal services organization. So we do civil rights work on behalf of prisoners, and I'll just mention the main priority areas. And unfortunately, we have priority areas because people's rights are being violated every single day in our prisons and jails in Massachusetts. But our small staff can't, unfortunately, handle all of those issues. So we do have priority areas. We help as many people as we can, but sadly do not have the resources to help everyone. So our priority areas right now are medical and mental health care, which are by far the largest, the area that we receive the most complaints in, I'll say. And we have a number of cases being litigated in those areas. And then solitary confinement, of course, which I know many of you have done work on and advocacy around, is also a major priority area of ours. We've made some progress in the recent past, but there's still a ton of work to do there. And then brutality, and by brutality, we mean staff on prisoner assaults. And unfortunately, those are commonplace in prisons and jails across the state. And I should say that for those who may not know, there's the state prison system, which is under the Department of Correction. And then there are the county jails. So each county has its own jail run by the sheriff. And we have over 30 facilities between both county jails and the state prison system. And we have one maximum security facility in Massachusetts, which is called Susan Baranowski. The other area that we focus on is extreme conditions of confinement, is what we call it. And these are things that have come up in the past in the context of overcrowding, where we've had to litigate cases because the prisons were so overcrowded. Although that has gotten better over the last 5 to 7 years, I'd say. Prisons are actually still overcrowded in large part in jails today. Technically overcrowded, certainly not as bad, but definitely still overcrowded. A number of places. And then another example is the prison phone rates issue, which Dean already made reference to, which is the exorbitant cost of prison phone calls and how families are largely responsible for paying for those calls. And in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in 1 year, residents paid $24 million to the phone company just to connect with loved ones who are incarcerated. So it's big money, and we've had a big campaign to end that practice. But because it's big money, it's been a big battle. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So our main issues, I just want to go back to brutality, because for so many of us, this has been an unprecedented year, but a very challenging year. I'm sure for many of you personally, I hope not, but I'm unfortunately relatively certain that at least some of us have lost loved ones during this time period. It's an incredibly difficult time to lose people. We unfortunately have lost a number of clients as well to COVID and to other things this year. But 2020 started out pretty bad. I'm hoping it's going to end much better. But in January of this year, there were dozens of prisoners who were systematically assaulted by guards at Susan Baranowski prison, the maximum security prison. Some of you may have heard about that, but there have been major problems at that prison for a very, very long time. A very racialized problem. You know, in Massachusetts, I should say that Black and Latinx people make up just over 20% of the Commonwealth's population. 54% of those incarcerated are Black and Latinx, but in the maximum security prison, you have 65 to 67% of those there are Black and Latinx. And so, and that's due to all kinds of things, systemic racism, of course, but at SUSA, there has long been a history of sort of racial tension at that prison. And in January, things had been getting to a boiling point long before this, but a few of the guards were allegedly assaulted by a number of incarcerated people there. And I won't get into context, but there was a lot that precipitated or preceded that event. Those individuals who were allegedly involved were immediately removed from the maximum security prison and sent to other prisons in Massachusetts. But nonetheless, in the weeks after that, they completely shut down the prison. They did not even allow attorneys to come in. It was completely shut down. And the rumors that we have consistently heard from different people is that they said, you know, the gloves are off, we're turning the cameras off. And in teams of tactical teams, basically suited up in gear with helmets, and faces were not visible because they had masks on as well, went from cell to cell, mostly targeting people who were suspected gang members, which basically meant Black and Latinx people, even though many had no affiliation with the gang whatsoever, and beat people and assaulted them with chemical agents, dogs, and physical force. And a number of people sustained very serious injuries, including broken eye orbitals and broken arms, and head injuries and things of that nature. So when we started hearing those reports, our office was pretty unprecedented. There's always been brutality. Oftentimes there's crackdowns, but on this scale, it was the first time we'd seen this ever. So we pretty much had to drop everything and all go down there and interview people and take photographs of injuries that were still fresh, which in many cases they weren't, because like I said, they had cut off all contact with the prison for several weeks. So by the time we were able to take photographs, they were not very visible. And also we were being forced to take photographs behind the plexiglass, which was very unhelpful. So this was throughout January and February. And then as we were digging ourselves out of that, trying to make sense of what had happened and how to piece together a story, of course, we were pushing, doing advocacy with the institution, trying to understand what they were doing about it, what kind of investigations were going on internally. We pushed the governor to do an independent investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office, but there has been no independent investigation thus far. And in fact, Governor Charlie Baker said that he trusted the Department of Correction to do its own investigation. And until now, we have had no accountability and no accounting of what happened from the Department of Correction. So, and then as you know, COVID hit in March, at least in our prisons and jails in terms of the impact. The DOC shut down the prisons in March. So there was no visitation. People were locked in essentially only to 23 hours per day for 4 straight months across the Commonwealth, with the exception of maybe a couple of jails who were allowing people out for a little bit longer than that. They did not have access to any family visits. Medical care and mental health care was also very limited during this time, which was extremely problematic given the fact that we're talking about a population over 70% of which have serious mental health issues or substance use issues. And so we started to see a decline in mental health of our clients, an increase in suicidality. A number of suicides, unfortunately, happened across the jail system and the prison system. We've done some data checking on this, and it does seem very evident that the numbers for the same period, 4-month period in prior years were lower in prior years than this year in terms of self-harm and suicides. So there's been a lot of collateral consequences to COVID, not just the 9 deaths in the state and county jail system. There were 2 deaths in the federal prison in Massachusetts as well. But there were a number of deaths that many believe, Tufts did a data study on this. There were a lot of deaths that happened during that period that were just unspecified in terms of cause, especially in April, which was the peak of when we started hearing about people, the high numbers of infection rates and people starting to die from COVID. So we of course did lots of, and we've been doing lots of administrative advocacy, meaning pushing on the commissioner and on various sheriffs to, even the very beginning, do basic things like provide hand sanitizer to prisoners was a battle. Masks were not provided to everyone until we filed a lawsuit. And social distancing, of course, is impossible. There have been a couple of lawsuits filed. The Public Defender's Office, along with the ACLU, filed a lawsuit early on to try and at least get out medically vulnerable people, but also pretrial individuals. It made very little sense to be, most of the jails are mostly comprised of folks who are pretrial, meaning they haven't been convicted yet and they're waiting for their trials. And it made little sense to be putting people like that in a prison during the height of COVID. And so that lawsuit was successful in reducing the numbers a little bit, which is great. But in the Department of Correction, unfortunately, there were no releases since there aren't many pretrial people in the state system. So we filed a lawsuit on that with the help of a lot of organizations. And that lawsuit is ongoing. We filed a preliminary injunction motion, which is something that tries to get relief very early on in a case. And only were able to get some very limited relief for people who are, some of you may have heard of Section 35, but it's this very unfortunate practice we have in the Commonwealth, and we're the only state in the nation that does this, unfortunately, but we incarcerate people who need substance use treatment, and we civilly commit them to prisons and jails in Massachusetts if there are insufficient Department of Public Health treatment beds. And that's a battle we've also been fighting on the legislative front, but we have a lawsuit active on that as well to end that practice. But for those individuals, we were able to get some relief similar to the lawsuit about the pretrial folks to ensure that they would only be placed there if there was very strong reason to believe that the risk of possibly contracting COVID was lower than the risk that they might die from their substance use disorder. But we are in the process of probably filing another motion in that case to try and get more relief, because as some of you probably know, the numbers in the prisons and jails just recently started going up again. And this is very concerning. And in one of the facilities that civilly commits people for substance use treatment, and these are people who do not have any criminal charges for the most part, the numbers was as high as a third positive rates as of a couple of weeks ago. So a third of the population there was positive. And then at Essex County Jail, they have, I think now the numbers are over 140 people who have tested positive there. So the numbers are going up. And one issue is that most of the prisons and jails are not testing people universally. So we see in the reports that we get from the court that officers are testing positive because they have to report that. And so we see that the numbers of staff testing positive are going up, but we don't have, there are a few incarcerated people who are being recorded as testing positive, but they're not doing universal testing. So we really have no idea how many people are positive right now in the state and county jail system. So we're very much still fighting the COVID battle with sheriffs and with the Department of Correction. We have heard wide-scale reports that masks are not being worn inside, which is obviously very concerning. A very high percentage of medically vulnerable people with chronic disease like hepatitis C, diabetes, HIV. So protecting those people has been a priority of ours. And we continue to push for those, especially medically vulnerable people, to be released through the lawsuit, but also we've tried very hard through something called medical parole, which some of you may know as compassionate release. It's also called compassionate release. And there have been a couple dozen people who have been actually released in the last 2 years under medical parole in Massachusetts, but it's been a very difficult battle as well. The Department of Correction, the commissioner makes the final decision on those petitions for medical parole. And basically you have to be technically within 18 months of passing from a terminal illness or permanently physically or cognitively incapacitated. But the way that's often been interpreted is that if you can speak and move, you're not incapacitated enough, and so you remain incarcerated. So that's another thing that we continue to push back on, and a number of other people are working on that as well through lawsuits and just trying to bring public attention to this issue and working with the legislature. So the other thing I'll mention, and then I think I'm going to play a little video, is I think we can all imagine how difficult, and we know how difficult this time has been, separated from loved ones and very isolating, and has just meant a huge shift in how we live our lives. For folks incarcerated, it has also, they don't have access to computers or phones. And so being completely cut off from visits until very recently, which I fear, unfortunately, Dean, may be short-lived given the increased numbers. And we may have a cutoff from visitation again. But it's just been incredibly isolating for them. And the phones are the only way they've been able to communicate. And the DOC and the county jails did allow for some free phone calls during the height of COVID, but that for the most part has ended. And so people are paying, in some county jails, a 15-minute call, is upwards of $8, $9 for that period of time, which is very high, and people easily pay thousands of dollars a year just to speak with their loved ones. So this is a big problem, and also it's a big problem because families should not be a source of revenue for corrections, and the money from these calls is split between the phone company, and then there's a percentage based on how the contracts are drafted that goes back to sheriffs or the Department of Correction. So they're literally making money off of these calls. And right now the sheriffs are fighting with us because they don't want the bill to pass, of course, because they say they need this money to provide programming, even though their budgets have gone up exponentially over the years, despite incarceration rates going down by over 20% over the last few years. So, and with that money, they hire more correctional staff, but we don't see recidivism rates going down, and we don't see a programming being invested in any more than it was before incarceration rates started going down and budgets up. So this is one of our major priorities right now. So I'm just going to attempt to share my screen and play that video for you now, and then I think then I'll just say a little bit about some racial justice work we're doing, and give you a couple of stories, and then we'll go from there.
Hello, family. My name is Alice Gaskins. I am the sister of Tony Gaskin, who is currently at Sousa Baranowski. Tony, you want to say hello?
Hello, people. How are y'all doing? So I'm so grateful for y'all for pushing for support for this bill and to help bring some relief to us inside these prison facilities. And I thank you all.
All across Massachusetts, there are thousands of families who have to spend thousands of dollars a year just so they can keep the phone line on, all right, for their loved one to call home. Today is a beautiful display of the concerns of families in Massachusetts, coming down here at the State House and advocating the push for a bill S-2846 to give every jail and prison in Massachusetts free phone calls.
If you really care about keeping people well and getting people home, this bill is a direct investment in doing that. This predatory system shouldn't exist to begin with. It's corporate profiteering, pure and simple, and it needs to be eliminated, not just from Massachusetts, but from the country.
These sheriffs, they're making money off the backs of the most incarcerated, poorest neighborhoods in our state. They claim that they need this kickback money to give us programs while we're incarcerated. This is the same ignorant rhetoric that we've been hearing for years. It's one big happy family of prison guards monitoring themselves and making the decisions that affect all of us. Exactly.
This bill is deeply personal to me, and just, the relationship that I was able to have with my father when he was incarcerated for 17 years. And thank you so much to my mother, who really carried that financial burden on behalf of our family, so that I can get to know my dad, who he was incarcerated since I was born. So I never had a chance to have a full relationship with him outside of the prison walls. And so those phone calls meant a lot to us. And I know how stressful it was for my mother to be able to pay that phone bill. Jeremiah is currently presenting a pledge to Senator Brownsberger, signed by children, basically asking him to continue to fight for this bill, no compromises.
We're not trying to allow them to dress the bill up in any way, shape, or form. All right, we don't want cheaper phone calls. We don't want some phone calls free and you got to pay for others. We want the bill as it is. That's why it's very important that we call legislators, all right, and tell them that you support Bill S-2846.
We should be a shining example of what different looks like in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But instead, we stand in front of a building that is proposing to build a new women's prison at the starting cost of $50 million. And I wanted to just remind everybody that, because we don't need a women's prison. We allocate that money to other places in our neighborhoods where these women and their families are waiting to receive them. Let's focus on justice as healing and the women that are in the prison. We need to be getting them out of that prison before we think about any structure that we need to be building. Thank you. Stay here. Stay here. Stay here.
Okay. So hopefully you can all hear and see that well. And I'd love to talk more about the campaign. I just wanted to mention a couple of other things. That, the woman who spoke in the beginning, and she played the recording on the cell phone from the incarcerated individual, Tony Gaskins, is a board member of ours. We have had 5 incarcerated board members at PLS, and we now have 4 because one, Ray Champagne, was released earlier this year, actually I think late last year, who is also exonerated by the New England Innocence Project, and had spent over 40 years incarcerated, most of that at the maximum security prison, and continues to be a board member of ours, but is luckily no longer incarcerated. We have 4 other incarcerated board members, and we'll be adding a couple more. So I just wanted people to know that. And also wanted to mention briefly, Arnie, I don't know if he is on, but Arnie's story is one I heard before coming to PLS, but learned a lot more about in coming to PLS. And it just raises so many things that are wrong with our parole and commutation system in Massachusetts. How we basically we don't commute people sentences. We don't give people clemency. We have terrible paroling rates, which Patty Guerin, who's on this, is an expert in. And there's so much more work that needs to be done there. We have all of our board members are lifers, actually, and they're all upstanding individuals who deserve a chance to be out of prison, but they don't currently have that because they're serving life without parole sentences, which is another injustice in the Commonwealth that needs more attention. So I think what I'll leave you with is that it's exciting for me to be at PLS at a time that we are really centering racial equity work in a way that I think is overdue. We're starting a racial equity in corrections initiative. We've actually already started it and doing lots of work in that area, but the system, it's not just that people are disproportionately incarcerated who are Black and brown, but once they're in the system, they are also disproportionately targeted in many ways. And the way that the system perpetuates structural racism is directly correlated with reincarceration rates and reentry failures. So that's something that deserves a lot more attention. If you're interested, I'd be happy to talk more about that too. Thank you.
We're so fucked up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we are.
Thank you, Liz. So glad to hear from you. And I hope that Community Church of Boston can coordinate more closely with PLS and do stuff together. We have this lonely auditorium that is waiting for activism to happen. So we're going to do one last song. We were going to do 2 before, and I cut Rob's song off. So we're going to do it now and cut off the last song. But I want to show you this beautiful basket that comes from Uganda. And it is our collection basket. We always pass around a basket at this time of the service during the last song before the question and answers. And I'm putting my check in, and you can put yours in either by mail to our address, which Charlie will put in the chat section at 565 Boylston Street, Boston 02116, or you can go to our website and contribute through PayPal or through credit card. We depend on your help to make this thing happen. We have a building that is an ornery old building, but despite that, we have a goal of turning it into a state-of-the-art, energy-efficient building, and we are taking steps in that direction. It's expensive, especially in a COVID moment where the restaurant below we've had to make major concessions on rent from them. So that's enough of the pitch. Go to our website and find out or send us your check through the mail. This song is for this moment on the planet, and it's from Rob Flax, who I'm so glad has joined us today. Find out about Rob Flax's music, R-O-B, F as in Frank, L-A-X. You can find him online. He is a pioneer in virtual stuff and in electronics to jibe with the web and with computers and with boxes that can do very cool stuff. So thank you, Rob, again for being with us today. And I'm just going to play some guitar licks behind this song.
My pleasure, Dean. So thank you all for tuning in and good morning. And it's wonderful to be here. I really enjoy every time I get to participate at CCB. It's such a wonderful community. I wrote this song while I was chatting with a friend who I was not able to hug. I'm a big fan of hugs. I made stickers that say 7 hugs a day because at the time of printing them, that is sort of my recommended daily dose of vitamin H. I really like hugs. I think they're wonderful. And now, because of COVID, it's really hard to get hugs. So I wrote a song called Virtual Hugs, and this is my virtual hug to all of you. I wish that I could send you more than virtual hugs, virtual hugs, virtual hugs, but all that I can send you now is virtual hugs, so I'll try to send you 7 a day. I guess that I could send you some heart emojis. Heart emojis? Yeah, heart emojis. I guess that I could send you all some heart emojis and arrange them in a geometric shape. Ooh, how I'd long to squeeze you, wrap my arms around you tight. Seems like I'm having amnesia. I can't remember what it was like. So I guess I will just send you all my virtual hugs, virtual hugs, virtual hugs. I guess that I will send you all my virtual hugs. I will try to send you 7 a day. How I long to squeeze you, wrap my arms around you tight. Seems like I'm having amnesia. I can't remember what that was like. So I guess that I will send you all my virtual hugs, virtual hugs, virtual hugs. I guess that I will send you all my virtual hugs. That's all I got, oh baby. You know that's all I got. So I'll try to send you 7 a day. Sending you all some virtual hugs and delighted to see you on the internet.
Thank you, Rob Flex. Thank you, Rob Flex. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm going to change the setup here so we can do a little bit of a Q&A. Let's see. Charlie, will you help me moderate this? You could put questions in the chat if you like, or I will just kind of go through, see if there's anyone with their hand up, and unmute them. If you're calling by phone, you can ring me up and or text me if you know my phone number. And I'm trying to figure out every possible way to do this. And I'm looking for a hand up. I see Joan McCracken. I'm going to unmute you. Joan, are you with us?
Hi, Dean. Joanne.
We can hear you. Joanne, I'm sorry. Joanne, hi.
That's okay. I wanted to ask Elizabeth if she knows if the situation that she's described in the prison system here. Can you hear me?
Here.
I write to someone's son in Pennsylvania. It's been in prison for life for a minor thing, and it's, I think, in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Once you're in jail, they throw away the key. Once you're in prison, now, have you seen anything? Is there any similarity that you know about, Elizabeth?
Well, I think in most, not all states, but most states, if you're serving a life without parole sentence, that means you have no ability to get out. You don't have an opportunity to see the parole board. And even for people who are serving second-degree life sentences who do get to see the parole board, the paroling rates are extremely low. So that's essentially lock them up and throw away the key, but so are a lot of mandatory minimum sentences that have long, we call them virtual life sentences. Depending on how old you are when you go in, you're virtually there until you die. So I think we definitely have that in Massachusetts. Actually, Massachusetts ranks relatively high in terms of the number of people we have serving virtual life sentences.
Well, all the things that you talked about, well, I can't remember them all right now, but not only being able to get out for half an hour in a whole day when they locked everything down. So that half hour is to take a shower and make a phone call. That's it. So how do they keep from going crazy? That's
I think, right, that was happening for 4 months straight. And I think that's why we saw incidents of self-harm, people just—
all the suicides.
Yeah. I think people just not getting support that they needed in very, very difficult circumstances. And also just needing to be out of the cell. So unfortunately, I think
there is an organization in Pennsylvania that does similar work. Would you mind if I give them your name and information? And I don't know, maybe you already know them.
Sure. I think I know definitely of at least one organization in Pennsylvania that we've referred people to before, but please do send it to me anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question. We've sort of over the years, starting with 20 years of sponsoring and championing Arnie King's case and working on prison issues as best we can with our limited resources. You know, it's just all of these different legislations that are proposed and that are co-sponsored. And it seems like nothing ever happens or nothing changes. Let me ask you about, do you feel like you have any true allies in the legislature that really want to effect serious permanent change in this Byzantine prison system that we have in liberal Massachusetts?
So I'll say yes. There are some, but I think like many, you know, across the country's consciousness is being raised about these issues. That's happening for legislators as well. There are people in the legislature who understand these issues and understand that things need to change. So, you know, there aren't as many as we need, for sure, and not everyone understands everything wrong with the system. There are some people who champion certain issues and are helpful on those issues, but don't quite understand other systemic issues that we have. So I think there are those who I think are truly committed to rectifying all that needs to be rectified, but certainly not enough. And I think that, this is a world that's behind, literally behind the wall and out of sight and out of mind. So people just, even when we tell them stories like, someone being quarantined with someone who's COVID positive, who's bedridden, and that prisoner has been taking care of the bedridden cellmate of his who's COVID positive and not being given any precautions and not having nurses come in, and then that person being quarantined with other people who haven't even tested positive for COVID. Like, we tell them these stories as things that are happening commonplace. And I think many sort of wonder if they're credible stories, because people are taught to discredit people who are serving sentences. And so we have an uphill battle sometimes in getting people to truly understand and believe the horrible things that people are enduring inside. But I think the other thing I'll say, Dean, and I know other people have questions, so I'm going to shift to that. The other piece is that we need people power, right? That it's not just a few people running around the legislature who are going to explain what's happening and get people to support these issues. This needs to be, I've always been a believer in people power, but in terms of civic engagement and legislative advocacy. It's not just having a few organizations work together. It's constituents, people who are residents all across the Commonwealth in districts who are willing to knock on doors and meet with their legislators and tell them why these issues are important. And that's the only way I think we're going to get the level of understanding and support that we really need. And so I'm a firm believer in that. And I think we've been working really hard with a number of the organizations and people you saw in the video. And I think that's crucial to being able to move this work forward in a meaningful way.
Well, I have a state senator and a state rep, and they get phone calls from me. And am I right that presently on the top of the docket is the issue of free phone calls to prisoners for prisoners? Is that on the forefront and on the House floor or on the Senate floor?
Yeah, the legislative session was extended till the end of the year. Usually ends in July, but our intel is that is still very much a possibility in terms of being passed this year. But there's a lot of pushback from the sheriffs. It's good because we've been pressuring the legislature and pressuring the sheriffs, and now we've got sheriffs saying, oh, well, they're actually not opposed to the bill as long as they get their money. They want to be made whole, and which is something we oppose, but for not lots of reasons. But it's also a tough year for that given the budget. So it remains to be seen what will happen, but for sure, there are people making hundreds of phone calls every week on this issue. And if you want to join that effort, let me know and I can put you in touch.
Well, I already did. So I urge everybody else to do the same. Know who your senator and rep are and let them know that prisoners need free phone calls, and it's a matter of justice and a matter of healing for every one of those folks behind bars. Rudiger, I see your hand up. Can I recognize you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for your marvelous talk. An easy would be nice to have you more often here at Community Church. I have maybe the smart solution for everything, maybe a turn, which I never heard, and I would like to hear something from you about this, which solves everything of this matter. How is the prosecution of the predators, from prison guards to judges? Is there a way, for example, if I hear often that people retire very quickly after a case gets prosecuted against them or whatever. garnish their pension, for example, have them on minimal wage working for the Massachusetts, but garnish all the wages, for example, for judges, if they make a mistake. So like everybody else so become very liable for what they are doing and what kind of job they are. Is there any, not defendants, what you are, but like prosecutor for the predators? I take it off then by then. Thank you.
Thanks. So if I understand your question correctly, I think you're asking about accountability, basically, for
Correct.
those who are enabling or participating in the torture or harm being done to people who are incarcerated. And there's been a lot of talk this year about qualified immunity. I'm not sure how many people have followed those conversations. This is not necessarily a solution to the problem, because qualified immunity. Oh, hi.
I got to mute Fran. I'm sorry. Okay.
And so qualified immunity basically allows. It makes it very difficult to sue someone for assaulting a prisoner, for example, and in the context of police officers too. There's a bill that would address in some context issues with qualified immunity. So there's barriers to accountability, I guess, is what I'll say, legal barriers. But there's also, I think more importantly, and the bigger problem is a societal, cultural barrier to accountability. Is people just some people feel like, well, if that you don't want that to happen, then don't break the law and don't go to prison. And there's a very common pushback that is very unhelpful, obviously misses the point. But I think we need to get to a place of that's really rooted in restorative justice and rooted in seeing people as humans, no matter what. And so we can really get to the goal of eliminating the harm that's done by the carceral system to people, and focusing on healing people in treating the root causes of incarceration.
Let me see if there's anyone else.
Dorothy?
Dorothy. Hi, Dorothy.
You probably have to unmute yourself.
All right. Hi. I wanted to ask about parole, but first I want to say that I think that all of us being in touch with our legislators on a number of the bills next session that PLS works on is very important. If they keep hearing from us, and they could hear more than once if something's heating up or we care a lot about them, that there are citizens, their constituents who are watching and do want action. And PLS has an excellent rundown of their legislative agenda or bills that they have worked with, and they have fact sheets. They're really good. So I think that we should use them, and they're good. We did get, I think, major reform 2 years ago, was it? So Dean, it's not true that we haven't gotten some gains, and I hope we're going to get many more. On parole, some of the fixes may not be legislative, and I wonder if we could have a rundown a bit of some of the bad things about the parole board. We all elect parole. We elect the governor's council people. They appoint the parole board people, and they're not functioning at a level that's adequate. And the governor needs to be pushed on it, and we need to be aware of it. Could we have a little bit of a summary of that for us, Liz? Or I know Patty Guerin is an expert, and you too, on parole.
All right, yeah, on parole, I mean, Patty's really the expert. I don't want to put her on the spot, but I'm happy for Patty to take that. And she's doing a ton of work on parole right now, probably as we speak. Patty, do you want to talk?
And then we'll ask Patty, would you like to join us on parole? Any words on that? You have to unmute yourself though, Patty.
Hi.
There you are.
Liz is as strong a spokesperson as I am on parole for sure, but I will list a few of the things that are most problematic, and then Liz can just add to the list forever, I'm sure. As Liz mentioned already, our parole board does not actively act on any petitions for commutation. There were none ruled on for over 10 years. The parole board is having its very first commutation hearing that it's had in 10 years this Tuesday. Similarly, it doesn't rule on petitions to terminate parole. There haven't been any petitions to terminate parole granted in over 10 years. The parole board takes close to a year sometimes to get its decisions back on life sentence parole hearings. So people see the parole board and they sit around for up to a year waiting to get their decisions back. The parole board also does not schedule hearings on time for people who, and this is not just for lifers, this is across the state, their eligibility dates go flying by and they haven't had a parole hearing. And particularly for lifers who need to get an extension for some reason, if they ask for an extra month for an expert witness or something extra, they get put on this place on next available list, and those individuals wait up to 18 months for a parole hearing. So this is all just absolute dead time for these people, and it doesn't seem to bother the parole board at all. The parole board has extremely low parole rates, even after the governor, even after the courts have said the parole board should be working urgently to get people out on parole and taking into consideration COVID vulnerabilities. They don't seem to be doing that, and the parole rates have not markedly increased at all since they've been told to try to expedite parole. The parole board is composed largely of people from law enforcement. It shouldn't be. There should be people with human resource backgrounds on it. There's a bill pending to try to increase the size of the parole board from 7 to 9 and to require that 3 of the 9 members have backgrounds in human services. I'm not sure what the likelihood of that is still passing is, but Liz might know. That's one of the bills that got held over from last session. Those are the things off the top of my head about parole, but I'll just turn it over back to Liz now.
Thank you, Patty. The bill is technically still alive as far as we know, but what I'm hearing is that there's so little that's going to be passed this session that doesn't have to do with COVID or the budget or this racial justice policing bill. So I think the likelihood of anything happening on parole this session is pretty low, unfortunately. But I think what we really need to do is, and what we're trying to do, the Coalition for Effective Public Safety and others, is to really mount a campaign around parole because so few people understand it. And I think it's very complicated, so it's not easy to understand. And there's all these different facets of parole. There's revocations and regular parole, and there's the commutations, which is really embarrassing. And that 10 years, and there are plenty of petitions that have been submitted, and those people never even got a response on their petition. And so that is something that should never happen. And it's happened to Arnie King for many, many years. So we shouldn't have to wait this long to get that opportunity. So the other issue with the parole board itself is that it's a majority law enforcement. And with a population that is so disproportionately people of color, but also people suffering from substance use and mental health issues, and a number of other things, they have really no expertise in any of those areas. And so it's hard to imagine, if you were running a business, to not have anybody on your staff that has expertise in the areas that most people that you're trying to deal with are facing is pretty unconscionable. So it's something that really desperately needs to change if we're going to see real change with the parole board. So that's all I would add to that. But there are so many things going on. And the video also mentioned the building of a new women's prison. which is another hot topic. And it's true that $50 million is just for a design study, not for the actual building. So it's many, many more millions of dollars to be invested in a population that's literally like 200, less than 300 women at MCI Framingham and South Middlesex, many of whom are pretrial and could just be released. So I think we have a lot of work left to do to refocus what we should be focusing on. We're not yet in Massachusetts in a sort of not minimizing, but reversing the trend of mass incarceration and decarceration, I think, is just starting to get some traction in the Commonwealth, but we have a long way to go to get people to really understand why that's important. And just to Dorothy's point, I did want to mention that before 2018, Massachusetts was one of 5 states that did not have a compassionate release program. And that is something that we'd worked on for many years, and the Coalition for Effective Public Safety worked on. And so we finally now have this medical parole process in Massachusetts, which is very much imperfect, but we have gotten a couple of dozen people out and a number of other people approved for release from medical parole. But one thing I want to add to that, these are people who have been approved for medical parole, but are still incarcerated because they have nowhere to go, because there's no nursing home facility that will take them. The Department of Public Health has basically maintained that they don't have to take them. So that's another sort of thing that we're involved in litigation with as well. But at least we have that in Massachusetts now, and that was a result of criminal justice reform in 2018.
Another question I have for both Patty and Liz, has there been any attempt for a legislative fix to this thing with the parole board where they take a year to make a decision? I mean, it's not like they're going and researching the case for a year to find out the ins and outs of it. It's just, and by that time, the entire board has forgotten what happened a year ago at the hearing. They should go out and make a decision immediately or the next day, you know, while it's fresh in their mind, while they still have it. I just say that from our experience with Lee Underwood, where 6 of our members went to that hearing, where he had an employer who said he'd hire him right when he came out. He had us as character witnesses, where he had attended church here. He'd been a member of our of our congregation, and he had been put back in because of a silly, worthless technical violation of parole. And so this hearing happens, we wait for a year, he's turned down, he's got to wait for another couple years before he gets, it's just, is there any legislative possible fix to that? Say, parole board, you must make your decision immediately. There's no reason for you to take a year.
Yeah, so the bill that Patty mentioned, it originally started as a bill that would correct that. I mean, in reality, they're violating law now by taking so long to get the decisions out. But the bill would have, or violated regulation, but the bill would have tightened up some rules around that. And Patty can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the intention. But unfortunately, the only piece that made it out of committee was this sort of restructuring the parole board piece and ensuring that there's different expertise, including on mental health and substance use on the board. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot more work to be done to educate people about why those other pieces are needed. But we are working together, the Coalition for Effective Public Safety, to with many community members and people impacted by parole, family members, to submit another bill this coming session. So if you want to be involved in that, please reach out and we can connect you, or Dean can connect you to the Coalition for Effective Public Safety.
Yes. Any other? I see Faye.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Faye.
I can't believe that we are the only state in the country that puts people in prison for substance abuse. And I'd like to know how that happened. The other thing is, I mean, we're in the middle of an election. I mean, we just had a primary where people are paying more attention to who they're voting for locally, for local candidates. And a lot of them are sheriffs and, you know, people talking about substance abuse and defunding, you know, talking about defunding the prisons as places where you put people who are suffering from substance abuse. So people are paying more attention. Meanwhile, we're the only state in the country that imprisons people. I mean, how did that even happen? That we have gotten to that point? That's just horrible. You know, there's got to be some way to you know, to mobilize all these people who are paying more attention. I mean, I didn't pay attention so much to local candidates before this election, but in the primaries, I started to ask other people, you know, well, what about these sheriff's races and all these things? And the other thing is we have Rachel Rollins, so I'm wondering if that has made a difference, having her, because she seems like much more progressive about things than we've had in the past, you know? So it's a big question.
Sorry, Patty, did you want to say something about the last issue of parole before I answer that, or were you?
Just one comment, that a big problem in Massachusetts is returning people who are out on parole to prison because of technical violations. That's what happened to Lee Underwood, and that's what happens to, I think it's like 86% of the people who return to prison go back for a technical violation. And the most common technical violation is having a drink or urine testing positive for some substance. And to put people back in prison for years is doing exactly what you're referencing, punishing people for some kind of substance use. And sometimes there's no more to the violation than an allegation that a person had a glass of wine. The Northeastern Prison Project is representing someone who's been back on a technical violation of taking cough syrup 10 years ago that had some codeine in it for being sick. So it's sometimes an excuse to just further incarcerate people who they don't think should have gotten out in the first place. And sometimes it's just their inability to understand anything meaningful about substance use and the way to treat it. But it's a huge parole problem, putting people back in for maybe even a single instance of substance use.
Yeah. And on the Section 35 issue, I mean, Dorothy and Lois and others on this in this meeting have worked on this for years too, so they could definitely chime in with their expertise. But this is it's a vestige of the past where we would criminalize substance use, and it's not. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's not a vestige of the past because it's still happening here in Massachusetts. So I think it did happen in other states, and still happens, of course, in the ways that Patty just mentioned, in a million other ways. But this is sort of a state-sanctioned policy of incarcerating people for not giving them access to community-based treatment, basically. And the other thing I should have mentioned about this is that as a result of a lawsuit that we had filed in 2016, the Commonwealth actually ended the practice for women. So women are no longer civilly committed for substance use to prisons and jails. They go to a secure facility in Taunton, Mass. That is a Department of Public Health licensed and run facility. But for men, they are still incarcerated at the DOC's MASAC, Massachusetts Alcohol and Substance Abuse Center, or at the Hampden County Jail under Sheriff Kochi. So, and it's like an average of 3,000 people per year that are incarcerated because we put most people who need to be civilly committed for substance use treatment end up in prisons and jails because there are so few community-based treatment opportunities for them. So the majority are not going to DPH licensed and run facilities. They're going to prisons and jails.
A couple of things from the chat. that November 12th, there is an annual prison legal services event. And the keynote speaker is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. That's exciting. I'm going to hurry up and get on there and join. Suggested donation for tickets, but the tickets are available online at plsma.org. That's great. Also on our chat is a notice from Fran Rosnowski. Says, join the parade to celebrate Tommy Rosa's freedom today at 4 p.m. Gather at 18 Stevenson Street in Everett, Tommy's new home. And it has, for more information, Fran's phone number, which is in that chat section. That is very exciting for Tommy and for his allies and friends. Let's see. We also have Rob Flax's website, which is www.robflax.com. And I want to see if there's any other people with their hand up. I'm going to just review. Let's see. I think I saw one hand still up, and that is Rudiger. Oh, no, Dorothy. Let me take Rudiger first and then Dorothy.
Yeah, thank you. No, very, very quickly, Oni, which comes always in my mind also, is what do you think, Elizabeth, about the idea to give the people the idea that every prisoner is not only the person who is in prison, which is very bad, of course, but also money for the taxpayer. So money is something which you can get everybody on the neck, basically, to put the vote in it. And when you arguing, let's say in demonstration or in court or wherever you are, that each prisoner each day costs so and so much money, so don't do it. No, so just buy the money.
Yeah.
So a couple of things around that. There was this big debate and actually a huge national lawsuit around whether or not prisoners should be getting the stimulus checks. And the pushback was that, the Trump administration said, oops, we didn't actually mean for them to be getting these stimulus checks, but they ultimately lost the lawsuit. And so they decided that incarcerated people who would otherwise be eligible anyway should be receiving those, or all of them should be receiving stimulus checks. So we had to do a fair amount of work. We sent hundreds and hundreds of packets into people who we have in our system so that they would know exactly which forms to file and by when and the deadlines and all of that so they could get their stimulus checks. But we've had to do a fair amount of pushing on the Department of Correction to just distribute them to everyone because you don't have everyone's name or we're not in touch with everyone who's incarcerated. And also to assist them because there are a number of people who have limitations, whether it's literacy issues or medical infirmities or other things that will prevent them from meaningfully accessing the stimulus money. And so we're still engaged in those conversations, but I will say the Department of Correction, and there's a side story to this, but the Department of Correction has said that they are distributing the packets to everyone and that they will assume the cost of postage for sending it out. However, there's this, canteen system in the prisons, and many people have restitution issues, meaning that, like, for example, if you test positive for substance use, it's called a dirty urine, and you can be charged restitution for that, for the testing expenses. And you can also, if you're seriously mentally ill and you have an episode or something and you destroy property, you can be charged restitution for that as well. Or if there's a prison fight, which is of course very commonplace because these environments are not safe and they are not meant to be safe, then any damage resulting from that fight, even though they did not do much to prevent the fight, can also be charged to the prisoner. And so once these stimulus checks come, there will be portions of that money that will be kept by the Department of Correction or by the county jail system for things like that. And I think that's part of the impetus for assisting people with that. The other issue, but there was a lot of pushback on, why should incarcerated people be getting these checks if they don't pay taxes, right? And so there are a couple of issues with that. One is that people who are incarcerated weren't always incarcerated, and many of them have paid taxes as recently as a few months ago before they were incarcerated. So they're due that money and they're owed that money, but also people are receiving stimulus checks out in the community who aren't working or haven't worked in a long time because they've been out of work. And the whole point is that what you're basically saying, Rudiger, is that people need resources in order to get both feet on the ground. And 96% of people incarcerated come out. But not only that, even for those who don't or aren't getting out for a long time, they're paying these phone calls. They have to many times pay a fee to submit a sick slip and other fees while they're incarcerated for various things. And they also have family members who are struggling and could use the money. So there's really no reason whatsoever that they shouldn't be getting that money. And then, there are other reasons why we should be eliminating the financial burdens on people who are incarcerated and their families. And that's why the cost-free phones campaign, the free phone calls from jails and prisons is huge, because it's an enormous amount of money, thousands of dollars on literally the most vulnerable families, and already disproportionately people of color who have borne the brunt of COVID. And this is just adding insult to injury. And so it's another way that we can uplift those people.
Dorothy, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. That was great to hear about. And as was the film, and everything was good that we heard. Thank you, Liz and Patty, for adding. I want, on the theme of, well, I just wanted to mention voting. I mean, we had, this should not happen in an election that we don't have the sheriffs at least doing active things to help prisoners vote. And basically a lot of those who are not a pretrial can vote. And those who get out after trial, after serving, do have the right to vote. And many of us do not know this. So we're not encouraging people and spreading the word in a way that's needed. I wanted to speak to the substance abuse theme. We do have a lot of ignorance still around substance abuse. And one of the things that social workers became aware of, and one social worker came up against and invented a bill that I think PLS is listing on its website, and the Social Work Association is happy is out there for the first year. The goal is to get something to happen that prevents people who relapse, who are in pretrial and diverted from being in jail, were to relapse and something show up that they are using again, they're sent to jail. So the idea in the bill is to require judges to not do that and not punish people for relapse if that's something that is a fact of life with substance abuse, substance issues, substance illness. So I want to say that we do need to have all of us work to educate our legislators that we really think that state, and all of us, that the state still has a problem that's manifesting itself in many places in the criminal justice system with regard to substance abuse. I hope that was clear enough what that was. It's to try to help people get treatment, but not if they're in treatment and they were to relapse. The individual and the clinician and everybody else should not be tried back in court, and the judge sending someone to jail because they relapsed. That is happening, and it shouldn't be happening. Thank you.
Faye, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's schizophrenic, because I know that there are senators that are against the police reform bill, but they're also talking about, dealing with opioid, with overdoses. So there's something very schizophrenic about that when you're throwing people in jail for substance abuse. You know, how can you be, you know, against police reform and at the same, you know, and jail reform, and at the same time support, you know, doing something about substance abuse in your community? It doesn't make any sense. And I think it's because people don't know that, you know, people just get thrown in jail. I guess it's just the men, right? It doesn't make any sense at all that you can campaign on one and not on the other.
And we should be careful to try to not get pulled into substance abuse terminology. It really is a substance use problem. It's not a substance abuse problem. And that language is part of what we all have been trained to use, and therefore it's hard to move against. But we need to decrease the stigmatization of this problem.
Lois, you wanted to chime in?
Yes. I wanted to just follow up, I think, on what Dorothy said about voting. I've been working on voting in jails in this election season. And I don't know whether people notice, but in the last couple of days, both the AG's office and Galvin's office and Katusian, who's the head of the Mass Sheriff's Association, I think it was Friday that they came out with this statement about how hard they're working to make sure that everybody who is eligible to vote in jails, which are people pre-trial, people convicted of misdemeanors, and everybody who is sectioned, how hard they're working to do that. The only catch is that they actually haven't been working hard, and they came out with this statement like, I don't know, 10 or 12 days before the election, which is going to make it impossible for people that don't have ballots already to actually vote. So it's kind of disingenuous for them to do this after. And the only reason they did it is that this coalition has been working to pressure them. We tried to get Galvin to issue a statement to clerks months ago with guidelines for voting, and we tried to get Katusian months ago to write a statement to sheriffs about what they need to do. So right now, the only way it's happening is if individuals in each county can, you know, have any kind of contact or whatever with people who are working in the jails, usually like the law librarians or somebody like that. But still, it has to have the blessing or approval of the sheriffs to make it happen. Kochi, in the statement that the AG put out, he's the sheriff for Hampden County, said, you know, everything that he's doing, and we know that nothing is happening in Hampden County. So it's easy for them to say it because nobody's going to come up behind them and say, well, that's actually not true. I mean, we can, but, you know, it's not going to be read in the same way. So, I mean, the main thing is that I think people are working on this now. We'll be working on it in the next election, and that goes hand in hand with voting, restoring the vote for people who are incarcerated with felonies. People might remember that in 2000, the right to vote was taken away from people with felonies who were incarcerated in Massachusetts. And there have been various campaigns in the last couple of years to try to reinstate the vote for people with felonies. And actually, during this primary campaign, both Markey and Kennedy said they were in favor of that. So that's interesting. So there'll be this ongoing work that started in this election season that will continue. Thanks.
Lois, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I'm just so honored that we have joining this meeting, service, session, whatever we want to call it, a bunch of folks who have long worked on prison issues. Lori Tamor Berry, Dorothy Weitzman, and Lois and Patty, and of course Elizabeth. Rolling up the credits, we'd like to thank Rob Flax for joining us today. He's such a great player. I just love having Rob. And want to thank Charlie Welch, our technical advisor and guru and poobah, for helping us through this thing called Zoom. And I happen to have written on my hand what you should call your state rep and state senator on, S2846. I didn't have any paper nearby. And I want to tell you about this welcome party for Tommy Rosa this afternoon at 4. If you want more information, it's in the chat session, the address and the phone number to call for information. And if you would like to join this group that's called Coalition for Effective Public Safety, be in touch with the church or with me personally, dean@deanstevens.com, and I can tell you how to get on that discussion group. It's a really very lively and active email internet group that I really am glad to participate, but mostly watch and listen to the people who are really long time on this struggle to bring humanity, to bring reform, to bring sensibility and sense and healing, more than anything, healing to our carceral, to our corrections system. Elizabeth Matos, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you all. This has been really a pleasure. It was really nice. Not enough time, of course. There's so much more, but I really am honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Join us next Sunday for Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein, who will join us on the eve of the election. And the music is by our beloved Magpie. They join us from upstate New York. The week after that, we have Mark Solomon, who has participated in community church for 50 years. He started giving talks at community church when we were meeting in huge auditoriums in the mid-60s. He's a retired government professor from Simmons College. We love Mark Solomon. He's spoken here at least 30 times over the course of many decades. Music that day by Alastair Mook. And the Sunday after that, which is November 15th, Arnie King. Arnie King is free. It's a joy to have him on my phone list and talk to him. He's just really wonderful, hopeful, breath of fresh air. And can you imagine saying that about somebody who just spent 48 years in jail? It's just a wonderful thing. His talk is called "You Can't Keep It Unless You Give It Away." And music that day by Reggie Harris, who joins us also from Newburgh, New York. And the list goes on from there. You can find more information on upcoming stuff that we're having. We're really excited to be widening our scope through this virtual platform, and realizing that we should be a broadcast every Sunday morning of really wonderful, hard-hitting, top of the line social justice, peace and justice. Thank you for joining us during our 100th anniversary. And with that, we will declare the meeting over. Meeting at the building, soon be over, soon be over, soon be over. Meeting at the building, soon be over, all over this world, oh, all over this world, Lordy, all over this world. Meeting at the building, soon be over, all over this world. Go in peace, folks. We love you. And be well.
Virtual hugs to all.
Don't forget, vote. Tell your friends all. We got to vote. We got to make those phone calls. Fulani Haynes, thank you for joining us. Go to our YouTube channel and see the Philani Haynes concert that we opened our season with. Take care, everybody. Meeting is over.